ठीक? Okay. So research projects, you can consider it as your final year project or your research problem, MS project. Research begins with a problem. We already discussed it. It doesn't need to be earth-shaking. It should be a simple problem. It should solve some small problem, or it should extend some existing body of knowledge. It should be something of significance for people or for a community. Not everybody needs to be addressed. You may address a very specific community. As I told you, that if there are some people who has the network connection of 4 megabits per second, those might be your community of interest. You might be addressing only that specific class. Okay? So, it doesn't need to be earth-shaking, but it should be something of significance. Identifying this problem can actually be the hardest part of the research. As I mentioned earlier, this is the hardest part. If you are working, or if you are able to get a really good research question, that no one can deny you then. Solutions are easier. To be honest, in engineering and computer science, solutions are not difficult because they are already proposed. People are solving problems using various approaches since 60s or 70s. Most of the solutions in almost all of the computer science areas, they are discussed in details in 70s. So the hardest part now is to come up with a good question. If you come up with a good question, you will find lots of good answers to it, because things are repeating. You are facing a question, and this question was answered, or this question was, or a similar thing was already faced 20 years back. Okay? And now you can use the solution used for that specific problem. And lots of people do like this. Like in computer science, initially there was centralized computing, mainframes. There were very little personal computers, or very dumb sort of personal computers. There was centralized computing, and then people came up with distributed. So there was a couple of decades that actually beaten the distributed computing so hardly that it was almost done. And now what to do? Come up with new idea of centralized computing. There was grid computing, cluster computing, all that stuff all comes under distributed computing. And then came cloud. So cloud is sort of centralized. It is distributed under the hoods, but it's still centralized at a specific place. We moved from distributed to centralized. And then we beaten the cloud for at least 10 years. Now everything is done. What to do next? Sare problem to solve ho gaye cloud ke. Come up with new idea of distributed computing. Again distributed. Come up with fog, mobile edge computing, CDNs, okay, cloudlets. So this IoTs, Internet of Things, this area currently is focusing on distributed. Now we have something centralized, we also want it distributed. Okay, सर्कल चलता रहता है. तो जो काम हमने क्लस्टर्स के काम करने के लिए किया था ना, वो somehow एप्लीकेबल है अभी भी. क्यों? वो भी डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड था, ये भी डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड. सिनेरियोज चेंज हो जाते हैं, टेक्नोलॉजीज चेंज हो जाती हैं, सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स थोड़े से चेंज हो जाते हैं. However, solutions are still valid. Okay, clear? So identifying the problem can be the hardest part. यार क्या ऐसा चीज हो जो something of significance हो, जो कोई फ़ायदा हो, जिसकी कोई यूज़ हो, जिसके लोग अभी डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, उसके ऊपर काम करें. ओके. In general, good projects should address an important question, original and significant. Okay. As I told you in the last one, this is not these are not like something I got from one book or something from internet. Rather, I actually read the resources, multiple resources, videos, books, some internet, and some slides as well, and I compiled the things that I found interesting and useful. Okay, so sometimes there is sort of repetition. There might be something, one argument will be actually addressing or will be actually supporting the previous one. Sometimes they might be a bit opposite as well. Okay, so don't worry about it. So it should, something that is important is that it should advance your knowledge. It should contribute something good to existing knowledge. Okay.